The Army's Futures Command is developing a strategy to upskill its workforce. It wants its soldiers and civilians to focus on things only humans can do and let automation do the rest. Kate Kelley is Chief Human Capital Officer at Army Futures Command. Kate, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. You told me recently that a key element of what you're doing is predicting what the future fight looks like. How much of that predictive work is human capital work, and how much of it's military strategy and tactics, Kate?
Francis, thanks so much for having me back. It's always great to talk with you and your audience and listeners. Thanks so much. It's a lot of intersection between the two is how I would answer that. There is such a huge focus today in Futures Command on what that predictive future fight might look like. And of course, your idea in talking through that would lead you to believe that this is about equipment, this is about operational concepts, and about capabilities. And while all that is absolutely true, what Futures Command is really focused on now is the intersection of the human dimension with that future concept for warfare, and more importantly, with how that human interaction should enable and be in support with that type of fight. So there's really an interesting line of discussion right now that we're in within the command, trying to make sure that we are predicting that concept, we are defining and describing it in a way that makes sense to people, and being realistic about the fact that we literally are trying to predict the future. And you know, General Murray here at Army Futures Command likes to say, one thing we know about this is we probably won't get it all right. But what he and I spend a lot of time talking about is how do we enable the talent to actually enable that fight? And so I think it's both. And I think it's really critical that while we're doing the kinds of equipment and concept development that you would traditionally think of in the Army, we are simultaneously working on skills and development of our soldiers, our civilians, and all the enabling partners that it takes to make this happen.
How would you determine which things are uniquely human that only humans can do, and which things you can take away from the humans and let automation take? And how will you continue to analyze that over time? Because I imagine the evolution of automated tools will change that definition over time.
Yes, I think you're exactly right on that. And I would say that there's a lot of thinking right now in Futures Command about the intersection of human intelligence and machine intelligence, and how the decision cycles in the future are going to be exponentially smaller and more concise than perhaps in the past. And what I mean by that is that on that future battlefield, we know that we're going to have to be able to make quick, decisive decisions. In theory, and I think this is proven very clearly in the private sector today, automation should be able to help us do that better. The key, however, is where is that human interaction and where does it stay and remain? Because we fully recognize that we cannot walk towards a fully automated system. There has to be an intersection of people. And that's partially about the analysis and the decision cycle, but it's also about who understands the capabilities and the equipment that we have in that future space, and who can maneuver, manipulate, and manage that equipment as well. So there's a component for humans that they have to understand the capabilities that they have control over, as much as they have to be part of the decision cycle itself.
It's fun and sexy to talk about the big 6 priorities and how all of this applies to them, but I imagine this is something that you're looking at for back office functions and everything, isn't it, Kate?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we're seeing right now in one of our more innovative startups here at Army Futures Command is we're building something we're calling a software factory. Really what we're doing is we're pulling talent from across the Army, talent that we already have in the military. We recruited it and brought it in through a variety of means, both officer, enlisted, warrant officer. We've trained it to be something else in the Army because the Army doesn't have a software-focused career field, let's say. And what we're finding is that this talent is already inside the Army. We're pulling it out of its existing career field and career track, and we're training it to be software developers, people who understand coding languages, and who can actually build interfaces that can help commanders on the battlefield, as an example, solve a problem or make a decisive decision for action. But also, this technology and this capability should enable the back office as well. Much of the Army we know today is still operating on legacy IT infrastructure and legacy IT systems. And so what can our software coder literate population do to help the Army on both the front end, so to speak? We like to say the pointy end of the spear. But more importantly, what are we doing in the back office to make things more seamless and more streamlined? Right now, today, the Army doesn't have this talent officially recognized. And so the other interesting thing that Futures Command is doing is trying to not only build this skill and upskill this population, but then make sure that we proliferate it across the Army in a meaningful way and that they're incentivized to remain with the Army and do this type of work.
Okay, less than a minute left. How will you measure if you've been successful, and at what point will you be able to think we can step back and say, how are we doing?
I think there are two components to this. Number one, we have to deliver on the capabilities. By and large, the key for Army Futures Command and for some of our talent initiatives is to deliver on what we're promising. So that means we need to put equipment in the hands of soldiers. It needs to work and it needs to be timely. But more importantly, when it comes to the skill development, we need to make sure that we have people who understand how to manage and maneuver it and also fix and repair it in a degraded environment, as an example. And then for me, the real litmus test is, do those people with those new skills stay with the Army, right? Because we're really building talent that is, quite frankly, needed across the private sector as well. And so what I'm trying to do is make sure that we keep and hold on to the right people for the right reasons who have the skills to work in this future space.
Kate Kelley, thank you very much for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Francis. Always a pleasure.